for joining us for today's session. As Carrie mentioned, we are going to talk about empowering designers to do good research. And even though this is a presentation and talk, I would really appreciate and love if you have any questions, just drop it in the Zoom chat. I'll either try to weave the answer while I'm doing the talk into the narrative, or I will definitely come back to it at the end of the session. And if not, we'll be happy to answer those over email. So let's make this an interactive session rather than just me droning on. Let's get started.
Real quick, Prayag, I'm not sure if you're already trying, but your screen is not sharing.
Yeah, no, I haven't started
yet. Okay, great. Sorry to interrupt. Enjoy the show, everyone.
Fantastic. So before we jump in and talk a little bit about how designers and researchers can work closely together, now talk a little bit about why you should listen to me, except maybe that I have a microphone and you're in this room, so you have to. But other than that, I am a published author of several research papers in human-centered design over a decade, some of them very highly referenced in academic circles. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Marvin. We are a user research tool, so we work with a lot of research and design teams. Our value proposition is that we help research and design team work closely together. So as part of part of my job, I talk to hundreds of research and design team across the industry, teams like Microsoft and Twilio and S&P Global, even consulting companies. So wide variety of exposure to various processes. So the talk today, a lot of it is based on the best practices I've seen across the industry, and also a little bit based on my own research. And if you were to leave today's talk with a few points, there are 4 points I want to make today, and 4 arguments that I would try to convince the audience of today. One is design and research, they need each other. They are much, much better together. In fact, we talk about how design plus research is better than design. So point number 1, design and research need each other. Point number 2 is not only do they need each other, good designers and good researchers know that they need each other and really want to work closer together. Okay, so as design and product leaders, a lot of our responsibility is to help them collaborate better, help make happen what the team wants to happen. Okay, and it's not the need and the want is not enough. There needs to be a cultural and a practical change in the organization to make the collaboration effective. And I'm going to leave the final point a little bit ambiguous, but great design teams and great research teams, in my opinion, are in slightly different lines of work than what we think they are. Okay, so and what that lines of work we'll talk about over the next 30 minutes. But it's really important to understand that research and design need each other. They want each other. Just because they need and want to work with each other doesn't mean that the collaboration is effective. You need to work to make that collaboration effective. And to make the collaboration effective, you need to slightly think of your roles in a different way than we might think traditionally. Okay. Before we jump into and I'll try to make this argument, I'm going to try a couple of things. One is I would love to for the audience here to map themselves on where they are in this design and research collaboration maturity check. Okay, so all the way from level 1, where you have no research, only design is just designs happening, to you have an outside vendor or an inside vendor who does research for design. Level 3, where design is research, where the design team is doing all of the research, to where research is embedded in the design team, where research is a core part of the design team. Maybe you have triads, maybe you have one research embedded in every product, or to all the way to level 5, where research is driving a lot of your product strategy. So I'm going to give us 1 minute to just self-reflect and post on the chat about where we think we are on our maturity journey. So 1 for 4 and 5. That's really good. If I was to talk about Marvin, we are, I would say we are between level 3 and 4. 4.5, awesome. 2 with spots of 3. that's really good. 2, 4, 4, 5. A lot of 4, a lot of 3s, a lot of 2s. Here is the good news. Even though this chart looks linear, it's actually not. You can go from 1 to 3. You can go from 2 to 4. In fact, it's actually easy to go from 1 to 3 than to go from 1 to 2 to 3. Wherever you are, I think the goal is, our clients go up to 3. That's great. The goal is to try and get as close to level 4 and 5 as possible. And hopefully in the talk today, we'll be able to get either to level 4 or 4 and 5. That's kind of that's the goal. I would love for you to take away some practical tips on how to up-level your design and research. Okay. With that out of the way, let's get to the meat and potatoes. This is a quote with which I like to start as many of my presentations as I can. Suri, who's the executive design director of IDEO, which is a legendary design firm that I'm sure a lot of you or all of you are familiar with, was asked how to become a better designer. How can companies, how can individuals be better at their design practice? And her answer was very curious. She didn't talk about tools. She didn't talk about philosophies or anything else. She talked about a focused discipline of curiosity, right? And when I say designers, not only do the designers love research or designers need research, this is what I'm talking about. Because research is a focused discipline of curiosity, right? And good designers understand that. Good designers understand that you can't design what you don't understand. And I went to design school. My co-founder went to real design school. And one of the things that we all agree on is design at its very best can only elevate our research's success. And with that, what I mean is we can only design what we are around the requirements that we understand. So no matter how great of a job we do in designing a solution, if we don't understand the problem, we cannot design a good solution. So ultimately, the results of our designers are constrained by the research that the designer does or the research team does in understanding and implementing the solution. So ultimately, our constraints are not what we can design, but what we can research. And great designers understand that. They understand that a good research will open a worldview to kind of looking at the problem a different way, and at the same time, it will constrain your thinking, right? So not only can you can you be more focused on the solution if the constraints require you to think more creatively, right? So as designers, our limits are the limit to the solution that we can provide is constrained by how much we understand our customers, how much we can understand our users, and that's what good research does. So a designer cannot overdo. A good design needs good research. You cannot deliver good designs without actually doing good research. And designers understand that. That's why good designers love research. The other part of the equation is research loves design. This is a little more easy to understand. Research doesn't exist in vacuum, right? Even if you have like a really great understanding of the customer, if that understanding does not materialize as good design or good product, that research is wasted, right? So the tangible impact of research is a good design. So researchers want designers to be successful because that means that their well-done job is now making an impact on the user, on the customer. And good researchers understand that. Good researchers understand that to be able to build that empathy, they cannot do all of the research. There are not enough researchers in the world to be able to supply design with that crisp understanding of the user and the customer, so that they can build good solutions. In fact, I would go on to say the best researchers I know, they understand that research should not be doing all of the research themselves. We'll talk a little bit about why that is, but the point I'm trying to make here is good research needs design. Good research wants design to work collaboratively with them, because the ultimate impact that research has is we are the products that designers design. And the fact of the matter is there aren't enough. First of all, research in its vacuum cannot build that kind of understanding. And even if they could, there aren't enough researchers in the world to be able to do all of the research themselves. So researchers want designers to help them with the research. So now there is need and want in both places. How do we bring this together? So how can research teach designers how to do good research themselves? If there aren't enough researchers in the world, if the research is if the best research understands that they are not the ones that need or should be doing all of the research, then they have to work with designers to help them conduct their own research. How do we implement that? The first point, before we go into kind of the practical aspects of this, is the message I would have, and I have for every research team out there, is your job isn't to do research. That's not your primary function in your organization. Your primary function in an organization is to build a culture of research. Your primary function is to elevate the voice of the user. If all you're doing is, kind of reacting to the research project that your product team, that your design team brings to you, you're doing your organization a great disservice. Because the biggest impact that you can make today in your company and in your organization is to build a culture of research. And to do that, you need to come out as research team. We need to come out of a reactive service provider mentality. If we as researchers are always reacting to the demands of the product and the design team, we're not doing our jobs. The best teams I know are a quarter ahead of the product roadmap. They go out and proactively seek out research impactful strategic projects that they can do, that they seek out the unknowns of the future products that are coming, and they take on these strategic projects themselves as a way to stay ahead of the product roadmap. So what happens to the reactive requests, right? What happens to the designers and the product managers who need you to do those projects? You need to be able, your other job is, or the secondary impact of your job as a creator of culture of research is to coach designers and PM to do good research. Because while you are doing these impactful strategic projects, there is still research to be done. And that research, a lot of that research needs to be done by PMs, needs to be done by designers, needs to be even with engineers. And your job is to coach them to build scaffolding for your team to be able to do that research themselves. One of the great ways in which I've seen kind of build this culture while using this paradigm is when you have these impactful strategic projects, bring your design team into the mix and have them act as note takers, have them act as facilitators, coach them while you're doing these impactful strategic projects. Bring your design team, bring your PM team in those projects and share how you do that research. PMs, designers make excellent note takers. They make really good facilitators. Bring those while you're doing these strategic projects. Use those opportunities to teach how you do good research.
There are a couple great questions in the chat. Okay, cool.
I'm keeping an eye on the chat. The whole idea, and I've met some teams who basically say the question is, how do you react to the mindset that argues research quality gets diluted by uncredentialed researchers? It's this idea that that research is some sort of voodoo, and you need the high priest to do research. I think that whole idea is flawed, right? If we start changing our mindset of what research is, from researchers answering questions to researchers enabling teams to answer questions themselves, that's the mindset that needs to change within both the research teams and the broader organization. The uncredentialed researcher, there are specific ways in which you do research for the research to be more effective, but that is a core part of any design thinking, right? Research is a core part. In fact, every great design team I talk to, and I ask them what key skills they look for in designers, one of the primary key skills they look for in designers is their ability to do good research, right? So this idea that somehow there are high priests of research and they're the only one who can talk to customers is completely flawed, and that cultural change is what I'm trying to kind of do, what we're trying to encourage. When research team opposed to the idea of empowering designers, how do you help researchers get past the idea of owning research and pivot to building the culture? Honestly, again, it's how do you help researchers get past? So there are two questions here. How do you change the mindset of the research team, and then how do you change the mindset of the design team? So that's a hard one, right? Like changing mindsets is not easy. I think research teams are a lot more, I've seen a lot more kind of open to this idea of letting designers do their own research, just because there are a lot of them are just completely overworked. Somehow there is this thinking that like now like undemocratic research is the cutting edge. It's not. I have never seen a successful team that basically like a successful research team just hogs all the research project. When team hogs all the research projects, it just mean that they don't have enough. So like maybe just ask them to do more. But most research teams have way too much to be able to kind of do all of the research themselves. So that problem mostly sort itself out. And designers, if any designer worth their salt, the first few courses you take in a design school is understanding your users, right? So if a designer doesn't understand that, that's kind of going back to the basic. There are a ton of articles. There's the internet, the books, they're full of this idea. That's not a hard idea to convey. But honestly, take any one-on-one design course and they'll tell you one of the core things that you need to build is to understand your customers. So again, it's a cultural shift, and I think researchers are trying to understand, are already there, because they're thought of as a cost center. There's not enough researchers to do all the research, so people start to kind of the research team already kind of really understand that they will need to they'll just not be able to deliver everything they're asked to, just because there's not enough time in the day. I want to make one more point. I'm going to come back to the question, is if you're designers, how do you embrace research, right? Like to building out on the topic that was in the chat. First of all, designers need to understand that they need to conduct their own research. If they don't, they will not build good designs. They will not build good products, right? But they also need to go and demand their research team to build the scaffolding they need to elevate the research, right? Like you should not be struggling with the best practices, the documentation, the recruitment, right? Like you should have support in the field when you're conducting your own research, whether that's best practices, whether that's recruitment help, whether that's feedback, constant feedback. Good designers get constant feedback on the questions they're asking, the research guides, all of that. So demand that your research team helps you be better researchers. And in 9 times out of 10, they will help you, because you can take this off my plate. That's fantastic, right? Just because you're a designer doesn't mean you can short circuit a lot of the research best practices. You need a research plan, you need interview guide, and you need to see constant feedback. It doesn't take a lot to come up with an interview plan and a design guide and a research guide. It does not. It takes only a few hours, and you'll be so thankful that you spend that time. So just because you're a designer doesn't mean you get to kind of short circuit the process. Again, invite researchers and note takers and facilitators in your research. And what that'll do is that'll help them give feedback on the questions you're asking, on the way you're conducting your research. Note taking is one powerful thing, that because everybody kind of does it. So when you bring someone in as note taker, it's an easy way to bring them in as collaborators, and the easy way to kind of embed them slightly in your project. One of the things I love, some of the designers actually ask the core researchers to come for the first 3 or 4 sessions as note takers. They might not come for like all of my 10 or 12 sessions. Just come for 3 and take notes and give me feedback. It's a great way to build rapport, great way to get feedback. And then share what you're learning constantly. Don't wait for like a final research, especially as designers. You have a lot more freedom in the way you're presenting your research, because ultimately you're responsible for the designs. So quickly share video clips, quickly share readouts, quickly share even on an interview by interview basis. Don't wait to create these giant research reports at the end. Honestly, like designers, if you're doing your own research, your deliverable is the design itself. So, don't get bogged down on like big research project like reports. Just do quick, but also just don't live in a vacuum. Do quick share out, do quick share of notes sharing on Slack, just like what you're learning, really, really good practice. So designers need to embrace research. Research needs to teach designers how to do research. And if both of them can work together, it's going to be good for your work. It's going to be good for your careers. And it's what everybody is doing. This is the next iteration of design or design thinking is this closer collaboration between research and design. We have a few minutes, so I will go back to some of the questions that we have. What about the idea that all research is not the same? Some, like usability is trained designers, there are some ethical method and theoretical underpinnings, more sensitive topics that are better served by trained researchers. Absolutely. I 100% agree with you, Melissa, on that. However, I do think I agree, and this is why I'm saying, there are impactful strategic projects that researchers need to own. They need to go and seek out. Okay, just because the researcher's primary job is to coach designer doesn't mean that they don't do their research, and that's part of their job. Okay, but I also kind of disagree that like usability testing lies in the design domain and foundational research lies in the research domain. I think there is an overlap. I think researchers should also do usability research, and designers should do foundational research. And the ethical concerns, the theoretical underpinnings, especially the ethical concern, and most designers are somewhat familiar with both of those topics, the theoretical underpinnings, as well as they might not know the actual methodology. They might have taken one research course in the design school, but they have, every designer worth their salt has some exposure to both of these topics. And I think our job as designers is to kind of, our job as researchers is to kind of bring that out and, build out best practices, build out, what does it mean to, to be ethical in your research. I'm not talking about whole IRB like review, but review the research plan and be comfortable with the research that the team is doing. Give them feedback if you think something is kind of borders on revealing a lot of very sensitive information. Ask them to not do that. That's what I mean by coaching your designers. Bias. This idea of I did somebody's asking, come across the narrative, designers, PM do research, they're adding to the bias and looking to validate their ideas versus being open to learning. Bias is a very interesting topic because I feel like most of us have kind of a foundationally flawed understanding of bias. Whenever we're doing qualitative research, which is mostly what user research is, we cannot get rid of our biases. This whole idea of unbiased qualitative research does not exist. And there is a ton of research around it, doesn't exist. Okay. The best we can do as to minimize our bias is to acknowledge them, to understand that we have biases, right? And when you are presenting something, you acknowledge, here is where we are a culture, we are a product of our culture, we're a product of our history, product of what we have learned, right? Cannot turn that off just because you're doing research, right? So this idea of like unbiased research is flawed, and there's a ton of research that is flawed. So as qual researchers, the best thing we can do is acknowledge our bias, and the second best thing we can do is ask our colleagues to call out our bias, okay? To call out our narrative. Is there another narrative that fits the data? Is there anything that we are not seeing? And there's nothing that stops designers or PMs to ask those questions. In fact, researchers should be asking those questions, PMs should be asking those questions, designers should be asking those questions. We are building a narrative, is there another narrative in which this data fits? And if that's the narrative, which one do we think is much more fits the data, right? So unbiased research, completely a myth. And there's a ton of research behind that. Best thing to do is just call it out. Here's where my bias is. Like, encourage your team to call it out. When they invite or when sharing the insights back into the research team, they can point you to previous research insights that are relevant to your work. That's a great point, David. Essentially, when you're sharing your research with the team, as designers, we are sharing our research with the design team, or the rest of the design team or the research team. There might be other research that's been done that might be super relevant to your work. In fact, in 70% of the cases, there's always some research that's relevant. So bringing that out, our product Marvin does that. That's kind of one of our core competencies, helping you figure out what other research has been done. But it is primary research job to kind of bring the existing research back to the designer and say, have you looked at this? If you don't have large readout, how do you ensure that the team is, I'm assuming, kind of hearing about the research on an ongoing basis? You don't need large readouts. Just go back and like clip a few sound bites, a few quotes that you think are interesting. Share those back on the Slack channel. Share a few quotes, right? Again, I don't mean to plug Marvin again and again, but that's what a tool like Marvin could help you kind of create these quick little clips, quick little snippets, share those. Or you can just type out the quotes that you have from your notes and share that into Slack. Just, a list of 5 quotes that I thought were really interesting from my last session. That's, take you, 5 minutes to get those in. So you don't need like big, large readouts. I'm not a big fan of big, large readout. Show, not tell. And quotes and video clips do a really good job at showing, not telling. There's benefit to getting other perspective on usage. There's also a spectrum of difficulty and impact of these. Lower difficulty and lower impact usability testing is a bit wasted on more senior researchers. Absolutely, right? Like a lot of times, I think senior researchers should be doing a lot more strategic research, and that's the way to get back to kind of level 5 when research is embedded into the product strategy. Absolutely, I think the research team should be well within their right to say, this is the work that the designers should be doing themselves. I think we've covered most of the questions. We're definitely way over time and people have started about. So we will, if you haven't covered anything, we'll definitely get back to you. If you folks need the deck, please let us know. Happy to send the deck to you. This is my email. Website is heymarvin.com. If you need a tool that brings research and design team together, please check us out. Hopefully we'll see you soon. And then the recording of the session would also, I think the recording would be posted soon, Jeff. So thank you all.
Sorry, the session that you did on Wednesday, where the questions weren't as active, we have the full presentation already posted on that link that I posted in the chat.
Fantastic. Please go check that out. And if you have any questions, if you want to just geek out on this topic, please email. I love to talk about this kind of stuff. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.